I still remember the exact sound of the champagne glass tapping against the fork. 3 soft clinks. The entire dining room went silent. Everyone turned toward my sister, Vanessa, as she slowly stood from her chair with a perfect smile painted across her face. The kind of smile that looked warm from far away, but cold when you sat close enough to feel it. The chandeliers above us glittered like tiny stars, reflecting against polished silverware and crystal glasses. It was Grandpa Arthur's 78th birthday dinner, hosted inside the old family estate that sat on the cliffs overlooking the ocean. The Whitmore estate. The place my sister always called a real home. And me. I was just the girl who never seemed to belong there. Vanessa lifted her glass elegantly. "I just want to say how grateful I am," she said sweetly. "Grandpa built this family from nothing. He gave us a name people respect." Everyone nodded. My aunt smiled proudly. My uncle raised his glass. Even the staff paused to listen. Then Vanessa looked directly at me, and her smile changed. "But honestly," she continued softly, "some people carry the Whitmore name without actually deserving it." The room froze. Every muscle in my body tightened. I felt dozens of eyes slide toward me. My heart dropped because I already knew what was coming. Vanessa laughed lightly, pretending it was harmless. "Lily Rose has never cared about this family," she added. "She disappeared for years, embarrassed us, ignored traditions, and now suddenly she's back acting like she belongs here." Nobody spoke. Nobody defended me. Not one person. I stared down at my untouched plate, trying to breathe normally while humiliation crawled up my neck. I should have expected it. Vanessa had always known exactly how to destroy me in front of people while still sounding graceful. But then Grandpa slowly placed his fork down. The sound echoed sharply across the table. He looked at Vanessa with an expression I had never seen before. Disappointment. Real disappointment. Then he spoke calmly. "If Lily doesn't deserve the family name," he said quietly, "then neither do you." The silence afterward felt violent. Vanessa blinked in confusion. "What?" Grandpa leaned back in his chair. "You heard me." My aunt nearly choked on her drink. Uncle Richard frowned. "Dad, what are you talking about?" Grandpa ignored him. His eyes stayed locked on Vanessa. "For years," he said slowly, "I watched you attack your sister because you thought it made you stronger." Vanessa forced a laugh. "Grandpa, I was joking." "No," he replied, "you were." The temperature in the room suddenly felt colder. I sat completely frozen. Because Grandpa Arthur had never defended me before. Not once. Not when Vanessa mocked my clothes. Not when relatives whispered about me leaving town at 19. Not when my own parents treated me like the family disappointment. But tonight, something had changed. Vanessa crossed her arms carefully. "With all respect, Grandpa, Lily abandoned this family." I finally looked up. Abandoned. That word hit harder than I expected. Because nobody at that table knew why I had really left. Not even Grandpa. Or at least, I thought he didn't. Grandpa sighed deeply. "No, Vanessa," he said. "Lily left because this family failed her." My chest tightened instantly. Vanessa's expression cracked for half a second. Then she recovered quickly. "That's ridiculous." "Is it?" His voice remained calm, but it carried enough authority to silence everyone. "You spent your entire life competing with your sister," he continued, "and you hated her simply because people loved her naturally." "That's not true." "It is." Vanessa's jaw clenched. I could practically hear her anger rising beneath the surface. She hated losing control. Especially publicly. Especially in front of wealthy guests, relatives, and business partners. Everything in Vanessa's life revolved around image. Perfection. Status. Appearances. And tonight, For the first time, cracks were showing. My mother finally spoke. "Arthur, this isn't the time." "No," Grandpa replied. "This is exactly the time." The room became unbearably tense. Outside the giant windows, waves crashed violently against the cliffs while rain streaked across the glass. It felt cinematic, like the universe itself had paused to watch this family finally collapse. Vanessa looked at me sharply. "You seriously enjoy this?" she asked. I stared at her in disbelief. Enjoy this? For years, I spent holidays pretending not to cry in bathrooms after her insults. For years, I watched my parents praise her while criticizing everything about me. Vanessa graduated top of her class. Vanessa dated successful men. Vanessa understood business. Vanessa represented the Whitmore legacy. And me. I was the emotional one. The sensitive one. The problem. I worked at a bookstore when I was younger because I loved stories more than finance meetings. I wore simple clothes. I hated charity galas. I asked too many questions. That alone made me a disappointment in this family. Then came the rumor that destroyed everything. When I was 19, money disappeared from one of Grandpa's private accounts. Not millions, but enough to create scandal. Enough for whispers. Enough for suspicion. And somehow, the blame quietly landed on me. Nobody directly accused me. That would have been too cruel. Instead, they used silence. Cold looks. Conversations that stopped when I entered rooms. My father asking where I had been that weekend. Vanessa saying things like, "Well, we all know Lily has always been irresponsible." That hurt more than direct accusations ever could, because it planted doubt everywhere. I remember packing my suitcase at 2 in the morning while crying silently so nobody would hear me. Nobody stopped me from leaving. Nobody came after me. Not even my parents. For 6 years, I lived in another city. I worked multiple jobs. I struggled to pay rent. I rebuilt myself completely alone. And eventually, I stopped expecting anyone to care. Until Grandpa called me 3 weeks ago. His voice sounded weaker than I remembered. "Come home, Lily," he had said softly. I almost refused. But something in his tone scared me. So I came back. And from the moment I arrived, Vanessa started again. Little comments. Little humiliations. Little reminders that I didn't belong. Tonight was simply the first time she went too far publicly. Vanessa looked around the table desperately. Are we seriously doing this right now? Grandpa folded his hands calmly. Yes. Then he turned toward me. Lily, he said gently, there's something you deserve to know. Every nerve in my body tightened. Vanessa immediately interrupted. Grandpa. Enough. One word. Sharp. Final. Vanessa went silent instantly. Grandpa reached beside his chair and picked up a thin brown envelope. I stared at it, confused. I hired a private investigator 8 years ago, he said. The room stopped breathing. My father frowned deeply. Why would you do that? Because I never believed Lily stole from me. My stomach dropped. Vanessa's face lost color. Grandpa opened the envelope carefully. The money didn't disappear randomly, he continued. It was transferred intentionally. Nobody moved. Nobody even blinked. Then Grandpa pulled out several printed documents. Bank records. Transfer confirmations. Signatures. Vanessa stood abruptly. This is insane. Grandpa ignored her again. The account activity traced back to someone inside this family. My mother whispered nervously, Arthur. But he kept going. The investigator discovered the money was moved through multiple shell accounts before being deposited into a private account connected to Vanessa. I felt the air leave my lungs. Vanessa looked horrified. That's not possible. Grandpa's eyes hardened. You were 22. You had gambling debt. You panicked. The room exploded into chaos. What? My uncle shouted. My mother covered her mouth. My father stood up so quickly his chair nearly fell backward. Vanessa immediately pointed at me. She's manipulating him. I couldn't even speak. My brain refused to process what was happening. Because suddenly, everything made sense. The accusations, the rumors, the timing. Vanessa had blamed me to protect herself. And everyone believed it, because believing I was flawed was easier than imagining Vanessa could fail. I felt sick. Actually sick. Years of pain suddenly rearranged themselves inside my mind, like shattered glass, forming a horrible picture. Vanessa stepped toward Grandpa desperately. You can't seriously believe old paperwork over your own granddaughter. Grandpa looked at her coldly. I believed you once, he said quietly. That was my mistake. Those words hit harder than yelling ever could. Vanessa's eyes filled with tears instantly. But even then, something about her crying felt performative. Calculated. Like she still thought she could control the room if she looked wounded enough. I was young, she whispered. And Lily was younger, Grandpa replied. That silence afterward hurt more than anything. Because he was right. I was only 19. 19 years old, when my entire family quietly decided I was capable of betrayal. 19 years old, when I lost my home. My father suddenly turned toward Vanessa. Tell me this isn't true. Vanessa looked trapped. Cornered. For the first time in her life, there was nowhere for her charm to escape. She started. Then stopped. That was enough. My mother began crying softly. Not for me. For Vanessa. I noticed that immediately. Even after everything, her instinct was still to protect her favorite daughter. Something inside me finally broke. I stood slowly. I should go. Grandpa looked devastated. Lily. It's okay. But it wasn't okay. Not even close. Because suddenly I realized something painful. The truth had arrived too late. Nothing could give me back 6 years. Nothing could erase the loneliness. Nothing could undo the nights I cried wondering why my own family didn't love me enough to trust me. I walked toward the enormous front doors while voices erupted behind me. Vanessa crying. My father yelling. Relatives whispering. But it all sounded distant. Muted. Like my mind had already left before my body did. Rain poured heavily outside. Cold wind hit my face instantly as I stepped onto the stone staircase overlooking the ocean. I wrapped my coat tighter around myself and tried to breathe. But instead, I cried. Not loudly. Not dramatically. Just quietly. The kind of crying that comes from exhaustion more than sadness. A few moments later, I heard the front door open behind me. Grandpa stepped outside slowly with the help of his cane. You shouldn't be standing in the rain, I whispered. He smiled faintly. At my age, I don't fear rain anymore. I laughed weakly despite myself. Then silence settled between us. Finally, he spoke. I failed you. Those 3 words shattered me more than the entire dinner had. Because all my life, that acknowledgement was all I wanted. Not revenge. Not money. Not even apologies. Just someone admitting I didn't deserve what happened. Grandpa looked out toward the ocean. I kept investigating quietly because I wanted proof before destroying the family. The family was already destroyed, I whispered. He closed his eyes briefly. And deep down, he knew I was right. A week passed after the dinner. Then, too, the Whitmore family practically imploded overnight. Vanessa disappeared from social circles completely after rumors spread through business communities. My father stopped attending public events. My mother avoided phone calls. Everyone suddenly wanted privacy. Funny how wealthy families always call it privacy when they mean scandal. Meanwhile, I stayed at a small cottage near the edge of Grandpa's property, far from the main estate, far from the drama. For the first time in years, I finally had silence. Real silence. No pretending. No fake smiles. No pressure to become someone else. One afternoon, Grandpa visited carrying an old wooden box. "I think this belongs to you," he said. Inside were dozens of letters. My letters. Every birthday card I mailed over the years. Every holiday message. Every letter I sent, but never received replies to. I stared at him in confusion. "They were never delivered," he admitted quietly. My chest tightened. "What?" Grandpa sighed heavily. "Vanessa intercepted them." I felt physically numb. Because suddenly, I understood something horrifying. She didn't just ruin my reputation. She isolated me intentionally. Grandpa sat carefully across from me. "She told the family you stopped caring," he said. "She convinced everyone you wanted nothing to do with us." I couldn't speak. All those years, I thought they ignored me. But many of them never even knew I reached out. I opened one envelope slowly. Inside was a birthday card I wrote to Grandpa 5 years earlier. The handwriting looked shakier than I remembered. I had written, "I still miss sitting in the garden with you. I hope someday things feel normal again." A tear slipped down my cheek before I could stop it. Grandpa looked heartbroken. "She was jealous of you." I laughed bitterly. "Jealous of what?" "You were loved without trying," he answered immediately. That confused me. Because my entire life I felt unwanted. But Grandpa shook his head slowly. "Vanessa needed admiration. You inspired affection naturally. People felt calm around you, safe. She noticed that even as children." I stared at the rain, tapping softly against the cottage windows. Maybe that was true. Vanessa always needed attention like oxygen. Meanwhile, I preferred quiet corners, books, deep conversations, peaceful things. We were opposites in every possible way. But somewhere along the line, her insecurity became cruelty. And nobody stopped it. A month later, Grandpa announced major changes to the family company. Vanessa was removed completely. Her trust fund frozen pending investigation. My father stepped down temporarily. The entire family reputation shook publicly. And somehow, people started treating me differently. Suddenly, relatives called me. Suddenly, they wanted lunch meetings. Suddenly, they said things like, "We always knew you were innocent." That part almost made me laugh. Because where were those instincts 6 years ago? People love supporting victims after survival becomes fashionable. But during the actual suffering, silence. One evening, Vanessa appeared outside my cottage unexpectedly. I opened the door slowly. She looked exhausted. No makeup. No expensive dress. No perfect image. Just a tired woman standing in the cold. "I need to talk to you," she said quietly. Every instinct told me to close the door. But instead, I stepped aside silently. She entered awkwardly, glancing around the small, cozy room. "You really live like this?" she asked. I almost smiled. Even now, she couldn't help herself. "Yes," I replied calmly. "Some people enjoy peace." She sat down slowly. For several moments, neither of us spoke. Then finally she whispered, "I didn't think it would go that far." I crossed my arms. "What exactly didn't you think would happen?" "The rumors." I stared at her in disbelief. "You blamed me for theft." I was scared. And I was destroyed. Her eyes filled with tears again. But this time, They looked real. I hated how easy everything seemed for you, she admitted softly. Nothing about my life felt easy. But I understood what she meant. People approached me naturally. Friends trusted me quickly. Grandpa listened to me differently. And Vanessa noticed every single one of those things like tiny wounds. I thought if people saw you as irresponsible, she whispered, they'd stop comparing us. That sentence sat heavily between us. Because finally, after years of cruelty, the truth sounded unbelievably small. It all came from insecurity, fear, jealousy. I looked at my sister carefully, and for the first time in years, I didn't feel anger, just sadness. Sadness for the years we lost. Sadness for the people we became. Sadness that love inside families can twist into competition so easily. You could have just been my sister, I said quietly. Vanessa broke down crying completely after that. Not elegant crying. Not controlled. Real crying. The kind that leaves people looking human instead of polished. I'm sorry, she whispered repeatedly. And strangely, I believed her. But forgiveness is complicated. Because believing someone regrets hurting you doesn't magically erase the scars. Some damage stays permanently. Months passed. The Whitmore estate changed slowly. Family dinners became smaller, quieter, more honest. Grandpa spent more time with me in the garden again, just like when I was little. We talked about books, about life, about regret. One evening while watching the sunset over the cliffs, he asked softly, "Do you think families can heal?" I thought carefully before answering. "I think people can," I said. "Families only heal when people finally tell the truth." He nodded slowly. And for the first time in years, the silence between us felt peaceful instead of painful. Vanessa eventually moved away from the estate. Not because Grandpa forced her, because she couldn't live inside the weight of what she'd done. But before leaving, she handed me one final letter. Inside, she wrote, "I spent years trying to become the daughter everyone admired, but somewhere along the way, you became the person everyone trusted instead. I hated you for that because I didn't understand it couldn't be stolen. Real love never works like competition." I read that letter 3 times, then placed it quietly inside my drawer. Not as forgiveness, not as closure, just as truth. And honestly, sometimes truth is the only ending people ever get. Now, when I walk through the old Whitmore Gardens at night, the estate no longer feels like a battlefield. It feels human, broken in places, healing in others, just like us. And maybe that's the strange thing about family. Sometimes the people who hurt you the deepest are also the ones who accidentally teach you your worth. Because after everything, I finally understood something important. I never needed permission to belong. Not from Vanessa. Not from the family. Not from anyone. I was already enough long before they learned the truth. End question. Have you ever been blamed for something you didn't do by someone you trusted? If this story touched your heart, subscribe to *LilyCalmStories* for more emotional and unforgettable storytelling. And before you go, tell me in the comments where you're watching from and what time it is in your city right now.